Welcome everyone to my latest video here on the subject of Mars in astrology and our sacred masculine or healthy masculine. This is a new series that I'm putting together on this channel. It's an astrological solar system series, so they'll be focusing on different things that the planets represent, planets of our solar system represent, and its an impact on us and as individuals, but also as a collective humanity as well. So it's called the Solar System Series, and I'm looking forward to doing this first one with you all. And let's get going. I did a previous video with an interview last year in May, and it's been uploaded to my channel. You can look for it. It is about the masculine, and on that one, I was a more expansive look at this, and this has also been something I've been putting a lot of attention on over these past several years about what is the masculine, and how it relates to us and the polarity with the feminine, and of course all the gender expressions and the different sexes that we have as human beings. Like, what does that all represent, especially on an astrological and psychological level, and those two intertwined. And there's also some mythology wrapped into this too. But this is just a first of many videos about the masculine with Mars. And it's going to be something that eventually there will be a book available that I will be writing. It's something that has been sort of outlined in my mind for some years now. So something to be aware of, that as I explore other topics and dive in order to share with you all what some important things and concepts, and how astrology impacts us all here, and the masculine, not just for men, but for everyone, for everyone. All right, so let's take a look at this. And so the highlights of this one is we're going to look at Mars and shamanic astrology, which is still the core of what I do. I'm moving more into both kind of this combination of shamanic and what I've been also calling alchemical astrology, which there are some other astrologers that kind of look at it from that perspective. May not be the same exact thing that they do, but I'm working with my own way of active experiential insights with alchemical astrology. Of course, we're going to look at Mars and the masculine and what is the sacred masculine and examples of the sacred masculine. So I'll be looking at some charts around that. Just not, I'm going to show you the charts. We're going to look at several people whose charts we're going to look at their Mars position, if you will. And then we're going to also look briefly at toxic masculinity and the quote 8 secrets that men carry within that were brought forward with insightful knowledge from James Hollis, who did some powerful work with men in the 80s and 90s and 2000s. And of course, we'll talk about a need for a healthy masculine in our world. Okay, so Mars in shamanic astrology, it symbolizes the masculine principle. At its essence, Mars is an active force, or yang, which, the yin is a more passive and receptive force in the philosophical, Chinese philosophical yin and yang. Mars relates to the masculine role in human beings within and without. So the animus, in those that are sort of a projected other out into the world. And then there are those that have it more on a more strongly personal, identifiable level within. Usually it is men, but it can also show up in other transgender and other gender expressions as well. So in general, though, for women, Mars symbolizes that animus. So again, it depends on the person. For most of the population, this would be basic level, true for men and women, but then the other part of the population where it's more of this gray area here. And then for in astrological cycles, Mars has a highly unique impact in personal and the collective lives of people. And that is something In the future, I'll explore more of when it comes to the Mars cycles, what Mars means, and kind of give you all an insight into all of that, because it's a place does play a really important role in its impact in our lives, especially particularly that active force. All right. So Mars and the masculine, the original shamanic astrology approach of the planet Mars and what it symbolizes differs a little from my interpretation of Mars. It's due to the observation doing thousands of readings that Mars was seen as an expression of the masculine principle, and also what Daniel wrote in his Shamanic Astrology Handbook. But there's something that went beyond it, doing the ratings, working with other, talking with other astrologers and reading their information as well, their books. And having those direct experiences that also taught me something more about what Mars represents in individual human beings. So traditionally, Mars was seen as something malefic, unhinged, and violent, and associated with the god of war. However, no planets are naturally good or bad. They are generally neutral in their expression. And even Stephen Forrest writes about that in his work. But Mars strongly resonates with the sign of Aries in the zodiac, just as Saturn resonates with the sign of Capricorn. So Aries can be, quote, warlike, but it's only if it's in a position where that's what its role is, that's what its mission is, that's what it's doing, maybe in defense, and maybe it's tasked to do that as a soldier. The masculine and Mars are similar to the yang of Chinese philosophical concept of yin yang. So one could compare astrological Mars, what I found, to kind of this adrenaline. So when it is given a healthy expression, it can be very helpful. But when it is suppressed or in operating from the shadow perspective or the wounded perspective, it can come out in more self-destructive ways, as we see in our domestic lives at times, as well as around the world outside ourselves, and in varying parts in politics, all walks of life. We see that happening there. The sacred masculine. What is sacred masculine? Can we experience it in our lives within and see it in others? Well, it is all around us in a vast array of roles in men, women, other genders, and gender expressions. Sacred masculine is an expression of the masculine within us all that involves the direction of our active force for the sacred. And what is sacred can depend upon each individual and themselves as a unique being. So holding something sacred refers to that ineffable something that we hold true to ourselves and our communities, an inner fire that is intended to be held in reverence within, even as we express it without or in the world. Is something I wrote in my book, Sacred Hearth Within, about Vesta. So sacred can be in any walk of life, and the feminine, other gender expressions, other, and the masculine, other types of things out there in the world. It's all around us, but it's in how we approach that, how we work with that, that can make it sacred in our lives. And so this is part of what we're going to be discussing here in on this video. So in sacred masculine's expression type, so there's 12 major versions of the sacred masculine, meaning that wherever Mars happens to be when a person is born at any given time. But it can also be showing up in the collective, just in general, wherever Mars happens to be. So there can be a sacred expression of that Mars, just as there is, the unhealthy or toxic version of that Mars. So for Aries, these astrological signs, these are sort of the basic expressions and what can be made sacred. For Aries, it's actional, active, and mission-oriented, individualist. Taurus, receiver of pleasures, comforts, and a purveyor or appreciator of aesthetics. Gemini, the Imagineer, Peter Pan, shapeshifter, eternal youth, communicator, and of course, the trickster. Cancer, the responsible nurturer and provider of safe space. Cancer, the responsible, Cancer got that. Leo, vision carrier and creatrix, prodigy and leader. Virgo, the priest, druid, earth steward, and master of ceremony. Libra, the conscious equal partner, relationship curator. We can also add in mediator too to that list. For Scorpio, otherworldly traveler, edge walker, creatrix, and life force channeler. For Sagittarius, it's the seeker, traveler, the philosopher, the inspirer of new horizons, and a trailblazer. For Capricorn, it's the teacher, educator, elder, keeper of knowledge, and administrator. One could include manager in there too. Capricorn could be really good at that as well. And Aquarius, experimenter, the unorthodox wizard, scientist, idealist, and spiritual technologist. And then for Pisces, the healer, empath, the channeler of ecstatic experiences, and the dream walker. So these are archetypal expressions, but these are also things that can be made sacred in Mars. So everybody on the planet has one of these 12 signs where Mars was. So, and it's relatively easy to find out on astro.com what our Mars sign is. So if we just type in astro.com, or if we have an app, an astrology app, you can find out what sign it is. And this is using the Western zodiac, not the sidereal, which would give you a different result sometimes. And find out for yourself. And if you wanted more information, I'm certainly one to be able to do more interpretation around that. And of course, even more. But here's some examples of the sacred masculine. Now, not everybody is perfect. When I say the sacred masculine, doesn't mean that these people were, quote, angels in the world, that they had no faults whatsoever, or they didn't have a shadow. Everyone had a shadow in this. So I'm showing examples where, their Mars came out in another kind of a way. And, these are people that through history that have shown up in and had really strong beneficial results for society, including Mahatma Gandhi with his Scorpio Mars and his passion and his will to see things through to the end, to see the change happen through his words, through his teachings. Cesar Chavez, really helping getting rights for people and here in the agricultural community in the West Coast, particularly in California. This Gemini Mars and the sort of the trickster energy and the sort of the way to connect with people and to talk with them and to kind of almost a Libra thing in there, but there is that Gemini that shows up in a good way. Doesn't mean again that these people had no problems or challenges or were somehow sainted in some fashion, but they are here. They left a powerful a change in the world after that lasted quite a long time. Oprah Winfrey with her Scorpio Mars and her passion for helping people as a philanthropist, but also obviously, she made quite a lot of money in her life, but she also helped a lot of people too with her work. Nelson Mandela, the first president of South Africa, and what he endured to get to his place with his Libra Mars and his ability to be that passiveness to just keep going and connecting and talking with people and sort of having this kindness to him, this generosity to him, and this humbleness to him, and Libra can really represent that in a big way. Then we have Susan B. Anthony, our Cancer Mars. One of the great things about Susan B. Anthony, she obviously fought for the rights of women and the suffrage movement, particularly in the 1800s into the early 1900s. And she had a comrade in arms, another woman that for the life of me, I can't remember her name right off the top, but she ended up, one of her gifts was she loved caring for her friend's family while they both worked together, and one was in the field more than the other. And so she ended up taking care and working that. And that Cancer Mars really showed up in an actional way to really make it her mission to go for it and to help out. And she cared a lot, and compassion, even as much as she was, ahead of her time. She had a lot of Aquarius in her chart too. So these are just some examples, which, there, of course, there are others in everyday life that show up all the time, billions of us, perhaps. And you may look around yourself and see it in your family, and your friends, in your colleagues, in the community. It's all around us. It's just that the headlines are usually driven by the ones that are getting sort of the negative press out there in the world. But the Mars can show up in any human being. It's if you're born on this planet, you've got a Mars sign. So whatever that is, you have an opportunity to make it sacred in your life, depending on how you choose that. It can become, one could say, the divine masculine, or the magical masculine, where there's this certain sense about it that elevates it to more of its higher self, a higher expression, if you will. And there's also, this book is been influential in my life for a long time. Under Saturn's Shadow: The Wounding and Healing of Men. And James Hollis talks about the 8 secrets that men carry within, and I highlighted half of them, a little more than half of them, but all of them are critically important. The ones that I highlight are: men's lives are essentially governed by fear, which is, can be true for all of humanity, but just as much for women as it is for men and other genders. Fear can show up really, really very, very strongly, and really kind of end up taking rulership over individuals. The power of the feminine is immense in the psychic economy of men. This has a lot to do with the inner feminine in themselves, and the work that each man needs to do with that. It's a process, what we call the sacred marriage, and working with our inner beloved. Men's lives are violent because their souls have been violated. So essentially, in my life, so growing up with a Mars in Pisces and even a moon sign Pisces, um, grew up to have to be, in a space like, oh, men do this and women do that. Well, learning later in life, after becoming an adult, learning something different that honored the sensitivity in me, the ability to express my feelings and be a giver in the world in that way, to be a healer in the world, uh, to be able to cry at, sensitive experiences, with sometimes in entertainment, watching a movie, or in conversations, or if there's something really powerful that is coming through on a spiritual level, there's feelings that come through, and the heart just sings at times. So this is something that men in general, their relationship with empathy and compassion, there's a layer there that needs to come out more and more. And so, because it's been violated in the sense of that, it's been kind of repressed or shut down to move men into a particular kind of category, where, brings up, it's like you are trying to raise a bunch of warriors, or trying to raise a bunch of people that are tough, and don't let them see you bleed, or don't let them see any tears or sweat. That kind of mentality was around for quite a long time, and only in the recent last couple of decades has been more sort of unearthed and opened up to a new way of being, a broader way, where some men are like that, that fit in that category that I just described. But then there are more in when it comes to being, that tough it out. But then there's this wide band spectrum that all different roles, all different archetypes show up in a big way. And so that's what I'm talking about when it's kind of pushed out into this other direction. These other archetypes move into a sort of the unconscious, and then they end up acting through that, and then they become acting out rashly. It's like they're rebelling against themselves and becoming self-destructive, which can become destructive in their outer self, in the world, with their families, with their community, and with the nation. So every man carries a deep longing for his father and um, his tribal father. So the connection to the ancestors. This also relates, there's something here too, and I'll talk about it, it has to do with rites of passage. And this would be for all of humanity, not just for men, but there's something really powerful here, that the connection to the ancestors in previous generations is really vital to our ability to come through and be heard, be seen, but also be whole in our life, to really be true to who we are, as we can connect into what was before us, so that we know on some level it informs us of to some degree where we're going. So it's important to have that, and to do some work, maybe even to heal that, to heal our ancestors, but also to heal ourselves at the same time. And so if men are to heal, they must activate within what they did not receive from without. So meaning, if they grew up but not receiving the love and the nourishment, or maybe an absent father or something along those lines, there is something there for them to work on, for us to work on as human beings, as men, as really all people. This is just in James Hollis's work, it's focused in on men, but this really, some of this applies to all people. Okay, so there's been certainly a rash in recent years of toxic masculinity, particularly after the rise of, here in the United States, of Donald Trump, and others. So the toxic masculinity really comes from unfaced fears, unhealed wounds, insecurities, and more. In recent years, we've seen a rise of this. However, this type of masculinity has always been present and was even more dominant in centuries earlier, particularly in the last 3,000 years, after the decline of the matriarchal societies and moving into more patriarchal societies. And that's when toxic masculinity really started to rise to the surface, with the professional armies and monotheistic religions, and this crusader mentality. And now so this is just uh, a short time period that we've been in, where we've given it some notice, but it's good to shine a light into this, so that we can see what needs to be healed. We can see where there is a lack of empathy, where there is a lack of compassion. I've listed some contemporary figures here, and there's also historical figures, but we see that everywhere. And so it's important to, from an astrological perspective, but also from a psychological and spiritual perspective, to really look at this and dive into this and see where, not just with the brain, but with the heart and the soul, to see how we can work with that and heal that and uncover the shadows, so that we can move into the another kind of paradigm in the world that is not about this. So the need for a healthy and sacred masculine. Um, so the need for it has definitely been greater than it has been even 10 years ago. This can include the co-creation of groups focused upon providing space for a sacred, healthy masculine to be supported and nurtured in the world. This applies to the masculine, all sexes and genders on the planet. And this can be done. It's all a matter of if we decide to do it as human beings. I mean, it really is about our choices. We get caught up in our worlds, and a lot of us can't focus on things like this due to maybe being in survival mode. We're having to care for things, but it's opening up to a different kind of way of life, and this would include the masculine within each human being, not just just men here. I'm talking about all people. And masculine is a principle, it's an archetypal expression, this active force, this sort of this sharp-edged blade that kind of sometimes cuts through things, but it can be directed to things that are more beneficial in society and not be so violent in its actions. So, so how can we do that? Well, it could be looking at each of the Mars signs within us and seeing how they can be expressed in a healthy way, and also healing as well. Now, this isn't just only you just look at Mars on the natal chart and that's all you look at, but you see it through the lens of the entire chart. And so what is this Mars expression and how can it be utilized in a good way? So, but it starts also in early on in a person's life. So meaning that more public and private education, various schools and groups will certainly be needed around this to create a sacred and healthy masculine in order to minimize uh, toxic behaviors in the long term. We can never eliminate it ever. It's not possible. There's always going to be the shadow. It's not to deny the shadow, but to bring it to to bring it to the light, to bring it to the surface so that we can see it and work with it in a conscious way and a healthy way. So, these ideas are just but a few major potential steps to help in a global society, depending on the community, the culture, religion, and everything. Now, there's more I'll say on this too here. So, how can we rebirth this? Well, I mentioned the education, the upbringing, but here's also the rites of passage. Uh, this would be again for all people potent ways to discover meaning in life from early on, and especially in our teen and young adult years. There's a powerful, usually unconscious craving for that, but it has been repressed, resulting in more chaotic expressions. So it's more, I don't know, repressed is one way, but it's also been distracted toward doing other things, other priorities, particularly in a capitalistic society. Carl Jung writes about living a symbolic life. So, not being dictated by the symbols, but really seeing them within ourselves and finding that meaning. And when we reach a certain point in our lives that we want to be, go through that passage, maybe honored, or maybe like, graduation, sort of a holdover of more ancient times when we reached a certain level of educational anointment, if you will, and being able to prepare for the real world. Birthdays in some degrees are also honoring the annual passage of our planet around the sun and one more year around the sun. Um, but also virulent violence and its propagation for thousands of years needs to be faced as the elephant in the room. I mean, we really see it all the time. It's just a person's wound and inflated ego expanding out and wanting to cover up and to such a degree that they will sacrifice everyone around them in order to protect their vulnerable selves. And you see that a lot in the world today in politicians. You see it in corporate leaders. You see it in many others out there. And definitely its own pandemic, if you will. So empathy, and men in particular urgently need to understand that accountability and vulnerability is a spiritual strength. So there's a growing number of men that have deeper levels and connected into empathy. And so I applaud that growing wave of that. I'm seeing that more, and as I uh, share with people and connect with my clients and men and others where there's greater level of empathy, but that accountability, even when we make mistakes, if we trip up something or something happens, it's a chance for us to own that. It's a chance for us to like, oh hey, that was me. I messed up there and I want to learn from this. So this is that can be seen as a strength, accountability. And then vulnerability itself, if you happen to cry, if you happen to need support, or you happen to bleed, it's not from a lack of strength. This is from a place of strength. This is from a place of, hey, coming into your own. You've done battle in a way that others may not have from of your own personal journey. Maybe not through violence or war, but something happens where you overcome things. It could be an underworld journey. It could be, you are a beginner at things. So this is something that wasn't, in my understanding and my experiences, hasn't been as highly supported in the past, but now it's much more, there's at least more resources available, more conscious awareness of it, but we still have a long way to go there. And of course, acknowledging the wounds and facing our emotional and soul truth. These are different things that we can all do. This is, of course, growth from uh, what I read with James Hollis's book Under Saturn's Shadow and other books about the masculine. And there's more work to do. I know my friend Taylor Elwood has been doing some great work recently. He's an author, works with does a lot of magical practices. Now, definitely check him out. He's actually writing a book about the sacred masculine. So that'll be something he and I might collaborate someday on and doing some work together. But there's this is just an opening, cracking open the door a little bit of this work and how important it is in the world. And I acknowledge there's a lot of more groups out there that are doing some great work, that are helping a lot of people, and with the masculine. And so there's more is needed, and to continue to improve and to learn from all of this. And one size is not going to fit all. And this is one of the great things about astrology is that, that with this Mars position, you've got 12 major ways, but then there are variants of all of those major ways. So it's not going to be that each person's going to have the same exact conditions or journey. They're going to have similar journeys in the sense of some of the human similarity, but there's going to be definitely some differences, archetypally speaking, anyway. All right. So thank you all for watching it, and thank you for being a part of this, and like and subscribe if you do, and share if you'd like to share with your friends or family. And you can find me at inspiralnexus.com as well as mystaralchemy.com. I've got an ongoing online course with Kaylin Castell that I'm doing about stellar gateways. Tune into that if that's something that interests you, and more videos and writings to come in social media and in print. So I look forward to more, and you can reach me for personal astrological consultations, readings, talks, and classes. Thank you all for watching, and I look forward to the next time. Be safe, everyone.